Every Thursday at 8 p.m., I speak to industry leaders and professionals from the startup world. Um, this Thursday, I have a very special guest for you. His name is Anand Bhardwaj. He is the people lead at Amaha, formerly known as INRR. So, if you're a corporate employee whose company provides them mental health services through a provider, chances are that provider is INRR or Amaha. Previously, Anand was the lead HR at Pocket Aces Pictures Private Limited. You must have heard of Filter Copy, Dice Media, Gobble, all those channels. So, yes, they are owned and operated by Pocket Aces. Previous to Pocket Aces, Anand worked in recruitment, and he's done recruitment for Big Four and a lot of international companies and banks, and as a part of Michael Page, ABC Consultants, and Conferry. So, welcome, Anand, to this conversation, and we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Ruchita. Good evening to you and everybody who's watching us. And as you were sharing this bio of mine, it went like a flashback in my mind. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope it was good for you because I'm gonna pick your mind about your career in HR and ask all those questions that we hope to be answered by someone who's on that side of things. So speaking of HR,
Yeah.
what, according to you, is the role of HR and how important it is in the overall growth and success of any startup?
So I honestly feel, and this is a jargon a lot of HR professionals would have heard. A lot of them may like it, a lot of them may not like it. But I
Mhm.
believe HR is a support function. Um, but when I say support, I nowhere intend to make it feel any less important. I believe an organization, when it's set out to achieve its goals, it needs its
Mhm.
people and energies driven towards those goals. While that is happening, while the churn is happening, you need few people or you need a department who helps provide stability, helps provide a cushion, some clarity, and also is there for people so that people can be at their best. And when people are at their best, they'll be productive, and if they're productive, the company is happy, right? So yeah, I as a, in language of sports, I believe while your batsmen and bowlers get your runs and get your wickets, it's a wicket keeper whose job it is to maintain the run flow and just maintain that the energy and spirit of everybody around. Right. So yeah, I believe HR is a support function and very critical to ensure people are at their best.
Of course, and thanks for that really interesting analogy. So it doesn't matter how small a company you are or how big of an organization you are, HR is important at every step of your growth and operations. And speaking of growth, operations, and early stage startups, so early stage startups being who they are, the size of their teams, the resources that they have available. Of course, you'll be able to tell us better about it. So, with those challenges or the unique position as an organization, what kind of challenges do startups? And speaking from your own experience, as you know, being associated with these startups all these years, what kind of challenges do these early stage startups face when it comes to hiring talent, sourcing talent, and even retaining talent?
Right. So yes, when I joined this previous media and entertainment startup as HR, the organization was only 20 people. Most of these 20 people were either creative folks, editors, founders, marketing folks, etc. And it was this early stage when I joined as HR. And so the first few challenges, not just mine own, but any early startup would face is limited resources, limited people to do hiring, limited people to do interviews, limited money to invest in promoting your job post or to spend on salaries, right? So a startup has limited resources and huge ambitions. So just operating with constraints is one of the challenges for HR and various other departments. And it is this constraint that leads to creativity, leads to just being more resourceful, being innovative, being risky. with different ideas, different strategies. Some may click, some may not click, right? So yeah, first and foremost, limited resources, limited awareness that people have about you as a brand, right? So while you may even have the money and exciting job roles, an exciting office, exciting people to work with, but if people don't know you, then how are you going to attract them, right? So lack of awareness about you as a brand is definitely a second challenge. And during my previous organization, we faced those challenges, and it led us to coming up with quirky strategies, some of which worked, some of which didn't. And
Mhm.
yeah, so we encountered those.
Yeah. What quirky strategy do you remember, like anyone that really worked for you when your startup was in the early stages?
Yes. So as a media company, most of our employees or members were creative folks. These are writers, editors, cinematographers, directors, designers. Most of them creative folks, and most of them happen to be young people,
Mm.
either fresh graduates or people with 1 or 2 years of work experience. Because again, we could only spend so much money, so we recruited for drive, hunger, and ambition rather than experience, right? So, but even when these people joined, after doing the same kind of work for maybe a year or 2 years, and mind you, these every creative folk would do a specific kind of project. So we would have a different department for which would only create memes, right? Because memes have to be pushed out on a daily basis, right? And it takes very little time to push out memes, and takes a different kind of creativity. A different
Mm.
department which used to do short form videos, a 4 to 5 minute videos, a different department which did YouTube web series, and another department which only focused on your OTT level web shows, your big budget, big level web shows, right? So we had a variety of products we were pushing out, and we would hire creative people or people in each department. Now we observed that around after 1.5 to 2.5 years, most of these well-to-do, well-performing, very say happy employees, performing employees, phase out. Most of
Mm.
these people would hit a creative roadblock, sort of speak. They would get bored of doing the same kind of content again and again. So, despite the fact that they were happy with salary, happy with the workplace, the work they were doing was not something that excited them anymore. And we spotted a trend that most of while our attritions were healthy, the kind of people who were leaving were not your people with limited duration. These were people with 2.5 years experience. So we felt that we spent so much time, energy, money mutually to train people, to make them just be better at their job, to understand the kind of content philosophy that our organization had. And once they're well tuned in all of this, they're ready to move out, right? So when you could actually get more out of your people, get them to do more, right, and grow together, they would move on. So the right kind of people will be in the organization, and that was a huge challenge because again, you have to hire new people, invest 6 months in their training. So what we did was, obviously this was only a observation in hindsight after we realized 2 to 3 years of operations that this is happening. So what we did was we repackaged our employment or the career opportunities at our organization at Pocket Aces, such that they also came across as growth plans for anybody who's joining. So, for example, you have a fresh graduate from a media college who enjoys creating memes, can create content, can edit videos, is multi-skilled but enjoys making memes. So we would hire people in the department which would make memes, uh, and make sure that they are doing well, and give them a 2 year plan where by the end of 2 years they are expected to achieve certain goals or milestones, not just with respect to number of memes they've pushed out or number of followers they've helped the channel to gain, but also personality attributes, personal skills, thinking capacity. There were certain abstract expectations we would have from people, which are growth expectations. So once we made sure we tell people that what are the expectations we have from them after 2 years, and once they meet those expectations across all parameters, we would then move them to the department which would push out short videos, because this would mean a jump, a leap in a skill set or a portfolio for a creative person, right? So you're making memes, now you get to write scripts and dialogues for 5 minute long videos. So it's a challenge. You feel more, when you do new work and when you do bigger level, more complex work, it's always challenging. You find it difficult, you find it new. And when it's new, you're excited, and that excitement keeps you sustained, keep making those efforts. So then we would have them spend 2 years as a writer or as a creator for the short form videos. Once they've met certain expectations after 2 years, we would then move them to the department which would push out YouTube web series. Because going from a 5 minute video to writing a 20-minute episode on YouTube, which has a different kind of audience, right, is another challenge, is another skill set, another feather on a cap. So basically, we showed them what are the different job roles they could do. We packaged it as a growth plan. We made sure the HR and the managers are monitoring performance and expectations and growth quarter and quarter, year on year, and ensure that we spot for people who make these criteria and just keep giving them new challenges. It allowed us to retain people who had spent enough time at our organization to understand our values, our culture, be more confident, be more comfortable with the work setting, and then take up new challenges. And the positions they would leave as vacant when they move on would be then filled by either fresher or somebody from the department which makes the less complex content, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so when we started doing this, while this is not rocket science, it was just some extra efforts to monitor things like this and spot people, communicate to them, keep them excited, keep them challenged to meet those goals. And once we did that, we observed that some of the people who were more tenured, who were well performers, they stuck on for even 4 or 5 years. There was one particular individual who joined our organization before me, uh, fresh as a graduate from a media college, and he's ended up spending 6.5 years from a script writer with no work experience to writing the script for one of the most popular OTT shows produced by an Indian production company. Right, so he spent 6 years, and very rarely do people, creative people with 6 years work experience, get to write Netflix shows. So we had one individual who made good use of the growth plan and proved us right that if you show milestones and growth to people, they will retain, and you will then also keep adding fresh talent. So that worked. We were able to retain better people.
That's wonderful. I mean, it makes so much more sense to do it this way. Like we have appraisal cycles every year in each company where we assess past performance and all those things. And that's just like that once a year when a person sees how well they've worked and how much better they can get. But just giving them a growth plan before, they've even started worrying about these things, and constant feedback, and investing in their learning and giving them those skills to grow themselves within the organization. So basically the company is also investing in the other person's success, in the employee's success. Obviously it's a great retention strategy. Surprised I haven't heard of it before. So the wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And again, speaking of the same thing, so this talent, like you said, you have such diverse talent in a media company, from script writers to producers to everybody. I just wanted to know, where do you source such talent from? Like you said, you hire people for the hunger and the drive and passion for these things. So how does a media startup go about hiring talent
So
in
I will.
so much competition? Yes, please.
Correct. I will admit that while it was an early stage startup, it was an early
Mm-hmm.
stage media and entertainment startup. Now,
Mm-hmm.
by default, media and entertainment company produces content which is entertaining, which is interesting, which most
Mm-hmm.
people tend to know of, as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to a early stage startup which is producing microprocessors, right? Which
Uh-huh.
only specific. So my point being, our product was such that the pull factor or the factor of attraction that people have towards the organization as employees was very natural and organic. And as HR and as our management, we only had to capitalize on it. Point
Okay.
being, because even if you're a young media startup, and back then there were a few other channels or startups, right? So we were Pocket Aces, we had TVF, AIB, and various other brands
Mm.
which are coming up, which is more exciting. Despite that, because we were a media company, there were enough people who would keep writing to us, because again, media as a profession, even the applicants have enough work to showcase, right? Of an accountant, a young accountant can produce a CV, right? But how do they work? How do they work on a day-to-day basis? What is the output they give on a day-to-day basis? You can't
Mm-hmm.
experience till you actually work with them. While a creative person who create content, who write scripts, write jokes, make videos, you can see those videos. You can
Mm.
experience what they've created. So my point being, I admit, because of the industry, it became easier for us and the product, it became easier for us to get people to write to us regularly seeking for jobs. uh, so that was just a by default thing that was an advantage. Apart from that, we made sure that we made noise in the ecosystem, be it on YouTube or Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. We made sure as an organization we're making a lot of noise by talking about the kind of content we're producing, right? Small wins. If our early stage video has reached, say, 1 million views, we would make a celebration out of it online and actually celebrate it in the office, right? So gradually, a sort of a culture started shaping up. While we had, say, a culture deck where we would write down what are the values all of us need to have, what is the culture we need to follow. Uh, since it was a small startup, 20, 30 people, we lived that culture. We celebrated a lot more. We collaborated a lot more. And gradually, we started talking about this story of our organization where culture became a huge talking point. Uh,
Mm.
and there's sort of word of mouth. Every sub industry is very small, as everybody says. Every industry is small, so the word of mouth happened very
Mm.
organically, right? People, 6 people that we hired from one particular college, spoke about our organization with their juniors and seniors, right? So and those stories spread,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those stories talked about our culture, how we
Mm-hmm.
operate, how we work, long hours, what are the kind of benefits that we have in the organization, what are the
Mm-hmm.
kind of policies do we follow in the organization, right? We hear examples of XYZ company having unlimited leaves as a policy, right? And they talk about it a lot online, and because it is important, these small aspects talk about your culture, about your philosophy, about the workplace. And the more you talk about it, the aspirational value increases and people get to know more, and people want to then work with you, because especially during mid 2010s, 20, when the industry started booming, the concept of culture started becoming more spoken about. And even young
Mm-hmm.
applicants who talk about, I want to join the organization because I heard the culture is great, right? So the second aspect, my point being, is making sure that you have a story, making
Mm-hmm.
sure you have a value to talk about, value additions that you can provide to people, and talk about a culture, because culture also pulls applicants. So yeah, we these are a couple of things that helped us attract people, apply to us, and then see if they make the cut and join us eventually.
All right. Just a quick question about culture. We speak about culture, right? I have always wondered, where does that culture come from? Who decides? How is it implemented? How do you, I mean, like you said, it's so fascinating to see that a company is attracting talent because of its culture. It makes you wonder, who did this? How did this happen? How did they create this culture?
Sure. So a lot of people do speak about culture, and when at Pocket Aces, when we would hear that people are applying to us because of our culture, we would ask them in our interviews, "What do you know about Pocket Aces culture, or what is the culture that we have over here?" Culture is not having coffee machines in the office, or bean bags in the office, or having a particular specific policy of no time. You can come in, come out, go out anytime. Culture, I believe, is the behavior, the environment that you create in an organization, which affects the day-to-day working, and or within people, and affects the dynamics that people have within us, right? So I
Mm-hmm,
believe
mm-hmm,
value. Most companies, when they make a culture deck, they are usually values that the organization believes in, which means a value is something that you have, right? And a culture is what you make of your values. Basically, culture is what you make of what you have, right? By and all of that translates to behavior. How do you interact with different individuals? What can people expect in the work environment, right? So, culture for me is things like the fact that this organization has an open feedback culture where everybody, be it somebody from your own department, be it a junior or a senior, can share their own opinion about what you do or your work or your project without fear, right? And on the other side, you as an individual are open to accepting that feedback and processing that feedback and not necessarily reacting to it, right? So that's an example of a culture we have. A culture is of transparency of information. What the CEO knows, do the direct HODs, head of departments know, and what each head of department knows, do their juniors, do their reportees know that. So exchange and transparency of information just gives more context to everyone. And when there's more context and information about the organization or about why the company is doing something, people tend to align more easier, more organically, and they feel more connected to the cause, right? So that I believe is culture, the work, the environment that you help create in an organization, and hence by default, for me, culture starts from the top. It's the CEO or the founders who define and talk about and set in place a particular set of values, and the culture, like I said, comes from the values that we believe in, and then talking about and ensuring that the head of departments or the next line of leadership also believes in those values, right? And also, hence, they can organically adapt to the culture. And once your leaders, your head of departments, your managers are also aligned with the same values and culture, they will naturally translate or trickle that down to their juniors, to the younger most employees. So for me, culture is a behavior, a work environment that you can promise to people, and a culture is shaped by the leaders. And then, obviously, if the leaders shape the culture, the younger people in the company can diffuse and spread that culture more organically, right? So that's how I look at it.
Nice. Well, thank you for that. Well, that was very eye-opening, certainly. People who are on this side of things, basically employees or team members of these departments, we don't generally get to hear about these things, what goes on in board meetings and what goes on in HR meetings regarding performance and culture. So really, thank you. Again, speaking of environment and context, in the last 3-4 years, a lot has changed in terms of the context of our world and our work environment. We've all gone remote at some point in the last 3-4 years. A lot of us are still in a remote or a hybrid model working for our employers. A lot of us have gone back to office. So I just wanted to ask, and if I'm not wrong, you were still with Pocket Aces when the pandemic started,
Yes.
and and your operations also had to go remote because of the restrictions of that time and the sensitivities of that time. How did you or your department help the organization, Pocket Aces, to make this switch from completely on site to remote while making sure the operations don't get affected too much? How did you do that?
Sure. So obviously, when COVID hit, a lot of industries, a lot of job functions went through a crisis, and for at different levels of intensity and in different ways. So for us, we had a lot of people who would do a shooting of videos where they would go to physically go to a location, set up cameras, set up lights. There are in any video production there are at least 10 to 30 people sometimes. Now suddenly we can't do that, and everybody is operating from their homes, right? So yes, I did observe that not everybody, right? So not everybody in the organization, but most of the people did face difficulty in actually doing their work. So a lot of the leadership of these different departments obviously came up with innovative ideas, and this is where the entire industry innovated itself of how to carry out shooting while having the actors. You have four actors in a
Mhm.
scene. All four actors are in different locations in their homes, and all of them are acting onto a screen. So it challenged everybody. So kudos to people in generally for adapting well. But as HR, our responsibility was to ensure that the kind of culture, the kind of behavior, work environment people were used to in an office where there's energy, there's ideas bouncing from everywhere. There are other people that you can talk to, seek feedback. There's feedback coming in from everywhere. We have to make sure that we replicate that. So as a HR and again as the leadership, right? Because in most of my examples, I will always talk about HR and leaders because I believe the leaders play a huge role in ensuring that whatever HR does gets implemented and actually executed and does not just stay as an idea, right? We made sure we increased the engagement we did with our people. Uh, Point being that everybody was working from their homes. We had to make sure that people felt like they were still at the office. They could still talk to each other, and hence, as HR department, we had various forums every month. Some of them were out downright fun forums where we would play games, play Among Us, play Heads Up, and different kinds of games where people would just unwind. There were forums where people would exchange their stories, talk about their wins and losses and failures of the month gone by. This would be done through town halls, or this would be done through having Zoom calls between two departments, and we would just talk about the wins, the achievements, and key initiatives you've done in the last 1 month, and just give updates to each other. Even if some of the people would know of those updates, because it's as it is a collaborative work environment and people across the departments work on a project, uh, people would feel that they can hear others, they can know what person XYZ is doing, right? So not just from a fun point of view, but from a point of view what's happening in the company, what is the other department doing, how much have they achieved, what are they celebrating. We would ensure that we keep talking about all these things through regular forums, sometimes twice a month, sometimes once a month, sometimes twice a month, through town halls or otherwise, and ensure people are engaged. So that was definitely second. Uh, Third, periodically we would make sure that we would call people at different locations. We would have some sort of meetups as well, in very very small groups, as and when rules started getting relaxed, so that people could again come back to office, see each other, feel at home again, etc. Right? So yeah, we made sure we kept people engaged. We made sure people are aware of what is happening across the organization, so that they're well connected. And yeah, so that helped. People felt that their work is being acknowledged by people from other departments and not just our content consumers. And that kept the spirits alive and helped us see through the COVID duration, the period.
That's again great because the reason I asked you this was because when a lot of employees suddenly went from an office setup to a fully remote setup, and then it kept going on and on, it kept getting stretched. We didn't know when it was going to end and we would be called back to office. A lot of employees reported feeling exhausted or burnt out, not because the workload was too much, but because they were used to going into office and collaborating with people in real time and bounce ideas off. And then suddenly there they were alone in their rooms for days on end. The only way to connect with their colleagues was on these meetings and calls, but they wouldn't have them around all the time. So a lot of people reported that. That's why I wanted to ask this. How did you do it? And clearly, constant communication, a feedback loop, investing in their growth and learning, and giving them a platform to share and enjoy and meet up virtually, even though they can't meet in person. That's amazing. Um,
Okay, sorry, when you mentioned this, one other thing we also they just came up is we
yes.
made sure that people also kept getting different projects from different departments, because this was also the phase when we were putting in place a growth plan where we made
Mm-hmm.
sure people, when they complete 2 years, are ready to move on to the next department.
Mm-hmm.
So we made sure that there was enough coaching happening, enough exposure being provided for to them for say the next level that they're supposed to reach, be it
Mm-hmm.
within their own department or be
Mm-hmm.
it to the other department, so they can work on more complex projects. So we
Mm-hmm.
made sure that they get exposure to the other work happening by means of coaching, by means of a little bit of training, because there was a lot of free time as well. There was not as much work. So we would use this time to either invite industry experts or have some of the seniors in the organization coach, mentor, or train and
Mm-hmm.
develop skills of some of the younger people. So
Mm-hmm.
when the market becomes normal again, we are ready with a much more trained, much more upskilled, much more ambitious workforce, so that we can hit the ground running and do more than we actually can.
That's a great strategy. So when sort of like you faced obstacles or these new challenges, you and your department, your team, your organization, the leadership, you planned not just to sort of manage what was happening, firefight, but you also had a plan for the future in mind as to how to make the best of what's happening now with whatever's happening and restrictions and limitations. How could you plan ahead? And yeah, that's one way to take advantage of and make the best of something. Yeah, that's great. And then again, while we're on the topic of remote work, I want to ask you, there have been, employees have had their own challenges and struggles, and then managers have had their own challenges and struggles, especially managing the performance remotely. And it has happened that projects have been delayed or a lot of those similar things because of this problem that happens with working from remote locations. So I wanted to ask you, in a hypothetical situation, say for example there's a team, it's a development team, and they are developing a product, and they're bound by deadlines and they have to deliver the project to the client. Now suddenly in the middle of this, a very important resource becomes unreachable, has been working remotely and becomes unreachable, and the manager cannot contact that person for a couple of days. Now your project is getting delayed. Laugh, this has happened. Okay, now
Yes.
I know for a fact this has happened. How do you handle this kind of a situation then? Ensure that work doesn't stop, employee comes back, at least you have a handle on the situation. How do you do that?
So, so yes, you're right. This has happened not just during COVID, but even after COVID.
Okay.
So, because again, I believe people are people, and anything can happen at any point of time. So,
Hmm.
yeah, irrespective whether we're working remote or not, my personal philosophy, and when I say personal, not just as an HR person, but as an individual, I
Hmm.
believe that any leader of a department, be it finance, HR, marketing, product, technology, these holistic departments that we have, and we have leaders or managers. I
Hmm.
believe the more skilled or the more expertise that a manager or a leader has across various aspects of what that department does, it only helps. It can only make for better situations. For example, under marketing, you have digital marketing, you have social media marketing, you have SEO, you have public relations, right? And all these four are hardcore functions, technically sound and technically different job roles in each, within themselves. And usually, you have one person only doing social media, and you have a separate person for digital marketing, a separate person for offline marketing. Example. Similarly, under HR, you have recruitment, you have engagement, you have payroll and operations, right? So you have different people with the right skill sets doing this thing. I believe a manager should be able to execute and operate across all these functions if it comes to it.
Hmm.
And I say this especially for a startup environment, where usually startups have limited resources, limited people, and usually few people are doing multiple people's job roles, right? So in these cases where somebody goes missing or absconding or falls ill, there could be various reasons why a particular young person or person doing a job role may not be available. And because you're a lean team, you don't have a second person doing social media. You only have one social media person, and like you say, they're gone.
Yeah.
I believe an ideal state is when the marketing person can take up the bare minimum for that social media portfolio with respect to execution. Right?
You mean
They
the
may not be.
marketing? Marketing manager, you mean, to
Yes,
put
the
this
leader, the manager of that
right.
department should
Oh.
have at least a bare minimum level of skills or experience or know-how of how to do
Hmm.
basics for a particular function which they are not directly working on. So as
Hmm.
HR lead, I am maybe lucky that I happen to have experience across recruitment, onboarding, engagement, a little bit of training, operations, payroll, and compliance. Right. So today, from my team, if somebody who does payroll falls ill, I know enough to make sure that I can spend some extra time, some extra working hours, or reshuffle my priorities or calendar to spend some time doing payroll so people can get salary on the 30th. Right.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I need not be a payroll and compliance expert, but I need to know enough to let the wheels keep moving. And I believe
Hmm.
in a startup where there are always limited resources, limited people, uh, the more multi-skilled an individual is, be it a junior, a senior, a leader, uh, the better. Right. So I admit this may not be true in every environment, every workplace, every startup. But yes, in this specific example, if I would be happier, I would be more relaxed if the leader of that department knows enough to get things going till we solve for it by hiring an intern or by outsourcing that project to an agency after 1 week. But you need work to
Hmm.
happen for that 1 week. So, yeah, the more skilled, the more hands-on a manager
Mhm.
or a leader is of any department, such scenarios and many such problems can be taken care of.
Nice. So, the responsibility to learn and upskill themselves lies not only with junior associates and employees, but also with managers and leaders. Like you have to know how to, yes, please.
Absolutely, absolutely, and not just this example where somebody goes missing, but young people or young professionals always seek coaching, mentorship,
Mm,
learning, guidance, from their seniors. So I believe in this example, if the marketing person has enough know-how about social media, the rules of social media, the tools that you use for social media, the trends that are active and current with respect to social media, they need
mm,
to know enough so they can not just solve day-to-day problems or roadblocks, but also support them with coming up with ideas, coach them in doing better, and also be able to groom them in evolving into a proper functional social media leader and not just a social media associate or executive. Right. So
right,
not just to fulfill job responsibilities, but also to provide the ideal or the right kind of training and mentorship and coaching.
right.
I believe a leader should be as multi-skilled as possible.
Agreed. And again, as long as we're on the topic of skills and capabilities, what kind of skills, like now that there's so many technological advancements and we've gone remote and so many different industries are opening up, what are some of the skills apart from technical skills uh, uh, that recruiters or team members, team leads, they look for in a candidate when interviewing that candidate or making the decision of hiring that candidate? What are certain skills?
So not just back then, 2015,
Mm-hmm.
16, or during COVID, but even
Mm,
today. And if you talk about startups, most of the startups, irrespective of the kind of service they're providing or the product that they are, have provided for the world to use,
mm-hmm.
irrespective of all that, a startup operates on data. And we all of us have heard that data is the new fuel, right? It's
Yes,
costly,
data is
data
the
is
new oil.
important. Yes, it's the new oil. Data is the core, right? So
Yeah.
every startup founder, every startup leader uh, is now used to making or is expected to make data-based decisions, not just go with their instinct. Obviously, instinct is a very strong tool to guide you in your decision making, but your instinct should also be fueled with data, with information, with trends, so that you are more sure, right, of the information decision you're making. Right, you may go against what the data is pointing to you as a leader, right, and
Hmm.
that's fine, right, as long as you know what the data is pointing towards and you have made a more informed decision, right. So I believe for anybody, be it a leader or be it a young person looking out for the first job in a startup, I believe this ability to understand and process data is very important. And when
Mm,
I say data, most people, and even I, think of an Excel sheet with a huge pivot table with a lot of numbers and a lot of fields, right? And that's okay. That's, I think, is the bed. That's the technical thing that you mentioned. I believe being very good in understanding Google Sheets or MS Excel is a technical skill set. And while that is important enough to know how to create a process, go through a pivot table, the ability to read in between the lines when you look at a data set, the ability to come up with a story of the product or the service through the data sheet or data in front of you is very important, right? That you either have it naturally or you don't. And if you don't, there are ways to train yourselves, to fine tune yourselves to become somebody who can uh, make decisions or can act on data, right? So, for example, in our media startup, even the youngest writers of memes or even the short form videos, 5-minute videos, they were expected to understand the data that a marketing team is providing to them about the previous video's performance. Right, so a
mm,
writer cannot just one day wake up and say, "I want to write about a certain parody of politics, example, or this particular movie." No, they had to make sure that there's enough data with the marketing team to prove that this concept, parody or spoof, works or not. And if
mm,
data shows that, okay, making fun of a particular famous character or thing is usually successful and works with our audience, then yes, please go ahead, write a video. But if data tells you it does not, then you better have a good justification of why this video will work, right? So, and creative people are not used to excellent numbers neither during their education, because they tend to spend time on creative concepts, creative skill development, right? So that's an example. Back then, we would either expect our even creative people to understand data. They don't need to make Excel sheets. They need to understand Excel sheets and understand data and the story that data tells us, right? So the first skill, I believe, or first attribute, is the ability to read in between the lines and process data and infer actionables from that data, right? So that's one.
mm,
I believe second is communication, and a lot of people, HR or otherwise, talk about the importance of communication, and I plus one it everywhere. I believe, especially in startups which tend to work remotely, communication, both written and verbal, is of huge importance, right? Because when you're not working with each other, when you're in a remote setup, there's a lot of context that gets lost in communication, right? So, and you may have, as a manager or even as a young person, you may have full clarity in your mind about what you're saying and why you are saying it. Why do you want to work on a particular idea, or why are you rejecting a particular idea? You have full context. But if you're not able to communicate that whole context, the why behind what you're doing or what you're not doing, to other people, then that, I believe, is a communication failure. And
mm,
not just when you're speaking to people one on one or on a Zoom call or one to many, but also written communication. A lot of us nowadays, be it MNCs or startups, we write a lot. We write a lot on WhatsApp. We write a lot of messages, updates, information, feedback, reviews, explanation, responses. We write a lot of things on Slack, on various communication platforms, on email, both internally within our team members or organization members, and also to externals, your clients, your stakeholders, your vendors, right? So there's a lot of verbal and written communication that happens on a day-to-day basis across two individuals, across all departments in a company. And if a person does not have the ability to communicate clearly, they will not be able to operate in any startup, I believe, in any organization, right? Because you don't, if you can't understand well, if you can't understand context, right, when somebody is telling you, uh, then you may not be as successful in what you're doing, because you're losing a sense of why we're doing it. Similarly, if as a leader, or as a leader, you're not able to explain to a team why we want to stop a certain particular project or launch a certain initiative, they will work on it, but they won't know why they're doing it, right? They won't know the full story. So, over communicate and communicate well, both in written format and verbally, is a huge characteristic or skill set, I believe, people who want to join startups or move anywhere in their career, they should
mhm.
focus on this. Third, very important when we talk about startups, and I'll be very quick with this point because I know I'm speaking a lot, is in a startup, because there are fewer people and these people are driven, hungry, ambitious, doing multiple things, there's lots of information, lots of ideas that keep floating around, right? So you may have a particular opinion on a certain project or a certain product. Five other people will have some other opinion, maybe the opinion very different from you, right? It is very important for individuals to have the ability to accept that other people may not see things the same way as we do, right? Or other
Mm,
people have given you feedback on something that you were very happy about, but the other person is not happy about it because, and they've given you feedback, right? So I believe in a startup environment, be it remote or on site, working from office, the ability to be open to feedback and the ability to change your mind, change your opinion when some other people have given you more context or more perspective or a different perspective is very important. Because especially because startups tend to have smart people or people who really want to do a lot and want to prove themselves, right? And such people want other people also to be successful, or at least should want other people to be successful.
yeah.
And one of my leaders, one of the founders I reported to in Pocket Aces, said this wonderful line, that in a startup and generally in life, it is more important to be successful than it is important to be right about something. Right? A lot of
Uh,
us like to be being right about what we think or what we say. And I agree with that. I think that too. But I believe it's more important to be successful as a team, even if you are proven wrong, uh,
yeah.
because you learn, and ultimately the team is winning.
Definitely, it's the team success and the organization success that matters at the end of the day. It really doesn't matter if we are right or wrong. We should try to be right,
Yes,
but
of
not
course.
obsess over it.
Don't be wrong too many times.
Yes, then nobody will believe you. Uh, all right, okay. I can see that our time is coming to an end, but I have one extremely important question for you.
Sure.
This is for our skill arbitrages learners and for myself as well. So basically, when these starry-eyed candidates, right, fresh out of college or with just about 2 3 years of work experience under their belt, when they are interviewing, or say forget interviewing, even before that, when they're applying also, so this whole process of applying and interviewing, then deciding careers, if to join this company or industry or not, what are certain tips you want to give them, and what are certain things that they should keep in mind and do, the candidates, while applying to these startups?
I've written a couple of LinkedIn posts about this long back because, of course, as HR and as recruiter,
Right.
over the years, I have developed a lot of opinions and observations around this. And having been a job applicant myself quite a few times in my life, I've applied these philosophies to myself. So, first one is definitely put your best foot forward. And by that I mean when you're applying to a job, or when you're sending your CV specifically to an individual over an email, make sure your CV is the best representation of you, right? I've always looked at a CV as a brochure, right? And all of us watching this video, since our childhood, we have seen brochures of 1,000 products, right? Outside your door, you would have a brochure of kitchen appliances. You would have a brochure for a new restaurant. You have a brochure for a washing machine, right? So a brochure is a one pager which highlights the best and most attractive features of that product to you, so that your decision making in the first 30 seconds or 1 minute of looking at that brochure is either yes or no, right? Either it's, so some brochures are well designed, with good colors, good quality paper, the right words, very clearly legible, no spelling mistakes, right? So you would enjoy such a product. But if a brochure has a lot of text to describe the product, I may not read it, right? Or none of us may read it. We're busy. All of us are busy, either doing nothing or doing a lot of things, right? So just like that, I believe a CV is a brochure. It's the first opportunity for you, for us to make an impression to the recruiter. And as a recruiter, I admit, if I compare two CVs for, say, a social media applicant, and one CV is of somebody who has maybe 2 years of work experience, from a decent and from a decent college and decent work places. The other CV is of a fresher who's not even finished their third year but are about to finish it. But if I see that the effort the fresher has put in their CV is more than the effort the other person has put in their CV, and when I say effort, amount of text used, amount of information shared on the CV, how well is the CV formatted, how well has that person highlighted some key achievements on their CV, right? Because both social media applicants should have done the same kind of work, right?
Yeah.
But what have they achieved? What are the key projects they've managed and completed? What are the laurels they have won, right? Highlighting those things that help you stand out and how you have highlighted them makes a huge difference. Because even as a recruiter, and all of us know this, an excuse a lot of recruiters use, which I believe is also a fair reason, is there are so many applicants, especially today, to every job, especially remote jobs. No, sometimes within 1 hour you will see 400 applicants to a remote job on LinkedIn, because remote jobs are much more in demand today than because there's just so few of them, right? So point is, you have very limited time to create a perception and an impression. So put your best foot forward. Make sure your CV is your best representation, is highlighting the best about you, is helps you differentiate yourselves and your achievements from maybe 10 other people. And how you achieve that depends on you, depends on how you look at creativity, how you look at being resourceful, what do you want to share about yourselves, how much effort you want to put in your CV, etc. Right? So first, put your best foot forward. Second, I think always be very curious. Be curious to know more about the world that is around us, right? So when we're applying to jobs, if after a month of applying to maybe 30 different jobs you're not getting a job, and that is very natural, very normal. Be curious. If you apply to a certain company, right, find out who are that company's competitors, right? Because a lot of times within sub industries trends are similar. So if a health tech company is on a hiring upswing, usually you will find some other companies are also on a hiring upswing because trends are similar, right? Some exceptions can be there. A company is recently funded, so they maybe have 30 more positions than their nearest competitor, but they will be competitors having the same kind of job roles, right? So be curious to know more about that particular industry, and try and find out more places to apply to. And this also holds true when you actually gotten an interview. I believe, right? A lot of us do tend to get lucky and get the first phone call from HR, sometimes 5 minute phone call, sometimes 20. It depends how much time the HR has or how much do you want to invest in that phone call, right? So in that 5 to 10 minute window, obviously the HR will ask you a lot of questions. So make sure your answers allow you to put your best foot forward, highlight the most interesting part of your career and what you bring to the table, but also be curious about the company. Ask questions, make sure you want to know more, right? And not forcefully have a template of questions, just because they've asked you, do you have a question in the end? Don't forcefully ask questions. I believe if you're naturally curious, naturally want to know more, you will end up, or you should be able to end up asking few questions about the job role, about what the job looks like from a day-to-day point of view, what are the growth aspects, what other opportunities does the organization have, right? So HR will be able to answer a few more questions. This will, at worst case scenario, even if you don't get the next call, you will know more information about the company, and more information can only help. Best case scenario, the you leave an impression in the recruiter's mind, right? Then they know that you were bothered and interested enough in the company to make a conversation
Yeah.
out of it and ask them questions, right? So be very curious, I feel, always about wanting to know more about the world, about the recruiter, about the company you're applying to, about the job you're applying. Be consistent. Uh, I myself have had phases where I've applied to a few jobs. I'm not hearing back anything since 3 weeks. I get a little demotivated, and that's very natural. I believe consistency is key. Make sure that you keep sending your CVs, keep looking for new avenues, keep being curious to come up with new places or new websites where you can find some particular kind of job, right? I said, don't keep sending your CV to the same recruiter. Don't be consistent like
Mm.
that. But make sure
Yeah.
you're consistent in your efforts, because consistency will only pay off in the end. And I would like to believe it did pay off for me once or twice in my career. Uh, Lastly, and very importantly, and I realized this especially in the last 1 year when I moved from a media industry to a healthcare, health tech industry. Uh, Always keep learning. Always, like I said, be open to ideas, be open to other people's thoughts, stories, be open to learning new things so you can adapt yourselves to able to take on more things. Very quick and personal example. Till the time I was at Pocket Aces, while I had gained enough experience across various functions of HR, I never had exposure towards HR compliance. PF, labor laws, ESIC, shops and establishment certificate, etc. There are some 100 different things put in place that organizations have to adhere to, and I never had
Hmm.
exposure. And when I joined a healthcare company, a health tech company, which tends to be more governed, and hence they has to follow more compliances, I found it challenging. It was lucky that we had a partner, a vendor, an advisor who would advise us on compliance. But over the last 1 year, I tried to be curious enough to ask many questions. Why are we applying for a shops and establishment certificate? Why are we applying for a
Right.
professional tax certificate in Karnataka but not in Delhi? I realized Delhi does not have a PT, a professional tax certification. So employees in Delhi never have a professional tax deduction. There's a certain deduction that happens every month in people's salary, right? That's just a small example of me not knowing about one huge pillar under HR, and over the last 1.5 years being challenged with it, and then gradually making my efforts to learn more about compliance so that I can confidently say to the world that now I'm a actual end-to-end HR professional. Earlier, I would say recruitment, talent management, HR operations, and payroll. Compliance should never be part of it, right? So my point being, lastly and most importantly, in this age today, where so many startups, so many trends, so many technologies, so many tools and ways of working and innovations are coming up, it can only help if we make sure that we keep learning and adapting, so that we're more ready for what the world is becoming on a day-to-day basis.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much for that. And yes, that's great advice. That is golden advice. We not don't always have this conversation. So really, thank you. And just to let you know and let the people who might be watching us know, at Skill Arbitrage, we do have these diplomas and certificates which are globally recognized. The training that's provided under these courses is globally accredited. It's on global standards, where we do CV writing, interview prep, content writing, English for professionals, email writing for professionals, along with a lot of other technical areas, also like data protection and those. But apart from that, we have all these courses that could help anybody from any technical background be more valuable in their own organization or open up paths to their success and growth by becoming proficient in the things that you mentioned. And I'm only saying this because it came up.
That's
So
wonderful.
thank you. Thank you so much, Anand. It's been lovely speaking with you, and I would love to have you back again someday. Very
Sure,
valuable lessons we've learned. Thank you so
sure.
much. And to everyone watching, this is Skill Arbitrage YouTube channel, where on every Thursday of each week at 8 p.m., I, Rishita, speak to industry leaders, founders, C-suite executives, and experts and professionals from the startup world to answer your questions. Please feel free to send us your questions in the comment section, and keep an eye out for next week's video. And goodbye and good night. Thanks, Anand, again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.